Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cobb Board of Commissioners meeting room this evening for a Cityhood town hall on the Cityhood proposals that are being placed before the voters this year. We should have 3 of those in May and 1 potentially in November. We can get a look at some of the cities as they are proposed in the county. Again, we have 4 of them: East Cobb, Lost Mountain, Vinings, and Mableton. And what we want to do tonight, the county government is not directly involved in these particular Cityhood proposals, but we have been getting a lot of questions about them and wanted to answer some of those questions the best we can from a county perspective. If you want to submit questions, if you're watching this online, we ask you to drop an email to cityhoodquestions@cobbcounty.org. Thanks to a large group of those people already, we've got about 30 questions already queued up on that email address. If you're here in person, you can write your question on a provided note card. You may want to wait till after we get through some of the preliminary FAQs that may answer some of your questions as we head forward. I want to right now send it down to the floor where Chairwoman Lisa Cupid, she is joining us here tonight. Chairwoman, I want to let you give everybody a welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Ross, for queuing this up, and thank you all of you who are here tonight in person or who are watching us virtually. This meeting tonight presents an opportunity for us to answer your questions around cityhood. We had a first meeting here in this room to talk with the public about what we consider to be the impacts to our services in the county and also to the county financially. What we didn't have as a part of that meeting is you. And so we've invited the public here tonight to, again, be able to hear us firsthand and for us to receive questions. Please know that tonight's meeting is a first of what we hope to be a series of meetings over the next month or so that we can better respond to the questions that continue to grow in response to cityhood. So with that, I'm very pleased tonight. We have some members of our Cobb County staff who are here. We have our county manager, Dr. McMorris, as well as other leaders. And up here with me today, we have Bill Volkman, who's our chief financial officer, and we also have our fire chief. We also have many other staff members who are out in our audience today who we hope will help us to answer some of the questions that you have that are specific to our services. But again, tonight's just a night for us to have a conversation and hopefully provide a little bit of clarity.
We have just a few slides loaded, and the first are for Bill Volkman, just to describe where we stand with some of these proposals and how it affects the county.
Thank you, Ross. So we wanted to talk about each of the cities, and up on the screen you'll see the proposed services that each of the cities are included in their feasibility study. So we can kind of walk through those a little bit. All 4 cities are proposing planning and zoning, code enforcement. 2 are proposing sanitation, Lost Mountain and Mableton. All 4 are proposing parks and rec services and a limited municipality court. And then the city of East Cobb is proposing police, fire, and 911 services. And with those services do come a financial impact. So we have 2 slides that we're going to go over with you today: the revenue impact to the county as well as any expenditure savings that would come to the county as well. So with the proposed services for each of the proposed services that we just showed you, starting with the city of East Cobb, it would have an adverse impact or negative impact to the county's revenues of roughly $7.8 million to the general fund and $14 million to the fire fund. This city being unique as the only one offering public safety services, the proposal in their feasibility study does contemplate shifting the fire millage that current residents pay into the county to support their general fund operations, which is why you see such a large fire impact. And then also 911 services. Again, this is the only city proposing that type of service as well, with an overall impact of just over $23 million. The city of Lost Mountain has very similar services with the exception of police, fire, and 911. So this would only have a general fund impact as we move forward. This is roughly $8.5 million. And when we go over the general fund impact, a lot of this impact is going to come from a few sources. This is going to come from insurance premium tax, which currently is paid into the county to date, TAVT, business license, as well as some real estate transfer taxes and things like that. So these are, as we look at general fund impacts, The other part of that is going to be business license and building permits. And that's going to be true throughout all 4 cities. So that's why you kind of see a little bit of variety of general fund impacts as we move forward. But like I said, with the city of East Cobb, you do see fire and 911 impacts. City of Mableton and City of Mableton and City of Vinings are a little bit unique because they're also proposing hotel motel taxes, which are currently, again, collected by the county. And these 2 cities are the only cities that are being proposed that have hotel within the proposed city limits. So that's why you see a line at the very bottom for hotel motel tax funds. But again, we'll walk through that. City of East Cobb, like I said, the overall impact is roughly $23 million reduction in revenue to the county. City of Lost Mountain is 8.5. City of Mableton is $8 million, and City of Vinings is just about $1.8 million. The total overall impact, if all 4 cities are approved, would be $41.4 million reduction in revenue. Jump to the savings slide. So when we look at the savings reduction, we work very closely with the departments to identify the savings. I know this does not look like much because most of the savings you'd think would come from personnel. Personnel is proposed to be reassigned to additional or existing facilities. So when we go through these, you're looking at basically operation and maintenance of existing facilities that are in there. Parks being the biggest of that because there's so many parks included in the city limits, and we have some very high operating costs, especially as we go through these. So you do have some of that. And this is, again, mostly utilities and maintenance. And when we get to fire, this is, again, for 2 fire stations, simply utilities and maintenance. So very little impact from a savings standpoint.
Chairwoman, I wanted to ask you, since that's his slides, just your reaction to those numbers and what they could potentially mean to the county.
Well, being on the board, when we see financial impact, we tend to equate it as far as millage is concerned because that's how we're able to help pay for a lot of our general fund services. And so I believe there is both a general fund and fire fund impact that would be realized should this move forward. From a general fund perspective, it would be about 0.7 mils, I believe.
That is correct.
And then a fire fund impact, which would equate to about 0.38 mils to our county millage. But needless to say, there is going to be a financial impact at the end of the day. And certainly we recognize there are some savings by cities providing services, but there are also just uniformity of services that the county is going to provide, whether or not there's a city or not, that we will still need to cover. And something that I think is not reflected in these numbers is the financial impact of the coordination that would be needed to work with all of these cities. And these cities are quite unique compared to our current cities that are full cities, but these are referred to as city lights because they're only providing just a fraction of the array of services that a full city can provide.
We have some frequently asked questions that are on the website. We have a website up that's called cobbcounty.org/cityhood. You can visit that for a lot of information. We've got all the documents, at least all those we can find, posted up there as well. And, you know, one of the most popular questions we get is, why is the county doing this? And this is not of our doing.
That is true. I mean, you know, the questions range from as simple of a question as, again, yes, why is the county doing this to our citizens? Cityhood movements, that's a grassroots initiative. It's citizens that have taken it upon themselves to form a new layer of government. So the county is very much in a position to respond to that. We don't initiate it.
And a lot of questions about why it's moving so fast as well, and that just is the way it went through the legislature. And it's really kind of kept us a little bit off balance when we're trying to figure out the effects on county government as well, just because it has moved so fast.
Yeah, so we anticipated that if the cityhood proposals were to move forward, that they would be on the November ballot. But we're well aware that it moved very quickly through this legislative session, and now at least 3 of the 4 cities being proposed will be on the May ballot.
This may be one for both you and Bill. One of the questions that's come up is people expect the county would see more substantial savings than we've put on our graphs, only $4.3 million. Why is that the number?
So working with the departments, that was something that we were, kind of contemplating as well, because the revenue side comes directly from the feasibility studies. So that was straightforward. We pulled that directly from each of the 4 feasibility studies. The expenditure side, we had to work closely with our departments to identify that. And the easy answer is for any facility we give up, obviously you're going to give up utilities and maintenance. So that was pretty straightforward. The part that we were looking at is due to the county's vacancies and some of our requests as we move forward to future budgets were for additional staffing. So rather than asking for some of the additional staffing that was proposed, just reassigning the existing staff that we have today to those needs as we move forward. So we don't anticipate a significant reduction we don't anticipate a reduction in personnel, just a reassignment of personnel.
Down the road, though, a couple of years down the road, though, that could provide some relief for the needs the county has.
Yes, and that was one of the key areas that we talked about in our presentation that we had right out of the gate, was really not so much savings of existing budgets today, but what that would mean as far as budget requests in the future. So we did have a good discussion, and there are significant reductions. We worked very closely with Parks. Their FY23 budget request would look very different than it does today, assuming no cities happen versus if cities take place.
I know we have our Parks Director, Michael Brantley, here, and I know he's very eager to come up in front of the microphone. But that's one of the big questions that we've gotten is how will the new city impact programs at my favorite park? There's also libraries and senior centers frequently mentioned, but parks is a recurring theme among the questions the county receives. And Michael, from your perspective as Parks Director, what are you looking at with these new cities?
Well, thank you, Ross. That's one of the questions that we get pretty frequently at the Parks Department. Just looking at the feasibility studies, there's not a lot of operational ideas of how the department's going to be created and how it's going to function. So that's one of the things that we looked at. A lot of the feasibility studies actually said that the cities may run very similar to the county. So we actually look at that and hope that those programs sort of at least cross over a little bit, but we can't guarantee that those programs will still be there. There's a multitude of ways to run a city or county recreation department, and it's just going to be one of the ways that they decide as a city to do that.
So when people look at their favorite park, and in these questions they name specific parks all the time, what message do we have for them about the future of that park? I mean, it's not a given that the city will run it.
Absolutely not. And again, that goes back to, we're actually looking at feasibility studies, and the feasibility studies are simply to say that the city could become a city. How things will run inside of the city, that probably will not be decided until you actually have an elected body, a mayor and a city council. Once that's decided, then they will just start deciding, hey, we're going to hire a recreation director, we're going to run a program like this is the money that we're going to be able to put towards that department. And that's when you start building that program out. Very similar to how Cobb County built their park system out 1966 moving forward. There's just a lot of ways that you've got to do that.
And I think if I remember, the deputy county manager said there's a 2-year clock that starts when they become a city to make some of those
transition.
decisions. Okay, thank you very much. Chairwoman, another question that we received, why did the county government hire a lobbyist to work against the Cityhood proposals?
Okay. We'll clarify, the county did hire a lobbyist, but the lobbyist was to help the county address a myriad of issues that we were addressing at the state capitol. And it did include Cityhood, but it included a number of initiatives. And so just with the sheer volume of matters taking place at the state, we needed additional help. That lobbyist has not been engaged per se in this effort. They have not been opposed to this effort. We have not asked them to help us take a position. We haven't taken a position. We just knew that in dealing with cityhood, redistricting, and the dozens of other bills at the state that we're contemplating its impact on the county, that we couldn't do this alone.
Okay, next question will involve Jessica Gwynn, our Community Development Director. We've gotten some questions from people in Vinings primarily. Will the Unified Development Code take suburban neighborhoods out of Cobb? And that's something that we've talked about before in the past, the UDC and how it's interpreted.
Yes, that's a great question, Ross, and that is something that we've talked about at length, and of course we had a good conversation with the chair about that a few months ago. The Unified Development Code as it's proposed really is about streamlining the codes that we already have. Currently, there are a number of codes that regulate, codes and documents, other regulations that regulate development in Cobb County, and a lot of them at this point are often conflicting even. So the goal of the Unified Development Code would be to have a one-stop shop where all of that is incorporated into one place. Hopefully that would enable us to take a look at our codes that we have currently to ensure that they are preserving the character that our Cobb County citizens would prefer. Bindings, that would be a more suburban character, but to ensure that we've got the right tools, the right codes in place to protect that character and see the development that our residents would like to see moving forward.
Follow-up question to that is somebody asked, why did Cobb County not amend the RFQ for the UDC to instruct prospective consultants to preserve the character of suburban areas?
Oh, we actually did whenever we released the RFQ again to try to solicit some more interest in that or in that specific solicitation. We did specifically include in there reference to the suburban character of some suburban areas. And again, it's not just suburban areas that we're looking to protect in Cobb. There are also specifically in West Cobb. And I know that's my home. I live in West Cobb, and there are a lot of residents out there that really value the more rural areas, even the suburban character of that area, as well as some of the other suburban character or suburban areas in Cobb County. So we recognize that Cobb County has a broad range of development types and lifestyles, and we want to ensure that that's protected throughout the county, that the quality of life is preserved moving forward.
Several questions along the same line about residents being upset with medium and high density develop being proposed or taking place in the proposed city areas, and wanted to get our reaction to their basic anger over that happening in their areas.
Well, I think one great thing that's happening right now, and hopefully a number of our residents have been involved, I know a number of our residents have been involved, is the update to the 2040 comprehensive plan. And right now we're working on the 5-year update to that plan. That is the land use plan that really drives the land use that we'll see in Cobb County for the next 20 years. It's something that's a very collaborative, community-driven process. We've had a number of community meetings already to this point to give the community an opportunity to come out and share with us what type of land uses they would like to see in their neighborhoods moving forward into the future. That land use map, the future land use map, is very much what drives development in Cobb County. The Board of Commissioners ultimately has the vote on zoning matters, and those come through the public hearing process. But with regard to medium, high density, the future land use map typically drives where that type of development would go, and then of course along with the zoning process and the Board of Commissioners, which is very much a collaborative process with the public, and there's public hearings and lots of opportunity. And I have heard a lot of discussion specifically in West Cobb, in the area that would ultimately become the city of Lost Mountain if it's approved by the voters, with regards to rumors of medium to high density residential coming into the area. And that is certainly not what's in the plan. If you look at the future land use map, that is not what's shown. If you look at where sewer is available, and also you look at the areas that are protected in that area with the Corps of Engineers properties, that's absolutely not what's planned and what's intended. So I'm not sure where that's coming from.
And I got one question from somebody. Does this mean we'll be rezoned if the new city comes into play?
No. So typically, whenever a new city comes into play, of course, they will ultimately end up with their own zoning ordinance and their own zoning map. Typically, whenever you have a new city, most often what happens from the outset is that they adopt the county's land use map and their zoning map and their zoning ordinance until the time that they've had an opportunity to really develop those for the city. But the zoning that's already out there, the zoning that's already been approved through the Board of Commissioners and through the zoning process over the years, there are vested rights to those zonings. Whenever a city is incorporated at that point, it would not change the zoning unless it goes through a public process, just as if it were to come here for a rezoning before the county.
Thank you, Jessica. Anything else to add while you're standing at the microphone?
No, I don't. I'm just glad to answer any questions anyone has about community development and the services we provide.
Okay, they're coming in hot and heavy, so.
I just wanted to piggyback off of the land use matter, because I also heard comments about me particularly wanting to put industrial development in West Cobb. And I don't know where that assertion has come from, because that is not anything I've ever stated. And I wanted to dispel that notion, because I've heard that repeated a number of times. And there has not been any intentional effort around that. No statements around that taking place, nor around putting high density residential development in West Cobb.
And Chairwoman, I wanted to, while you're talking, bring up something that you mentioned to me earlier today, and that is a consistent question that we get concerning schools and how these cityhood efforts will affect schools.
No impact to the schools. Kids will still be able to go to the same schools that they're zoned for.
We have Chief.
Well, let me back that up. As far as zoning is concerned, there is no impact. But there's a comment that I state that schools impact communities, communities impact schools. And so the general character around a school certainly has impact on a school. So indirectly, there could be some impact from development that takes place. But as far as rezoning of children, as far as creating a new school district, that would not happen under Cityhood.
Okay. Chief Bill Johnson with the Fire Department is here representing public safety, but we also have the acting police chief here as well, the 911 director, to answer some of these questions. And Chief, since you're sitting there eagerly awaiting participation in tonight's event, let me throw out some public safety questions your way. Maybe the others can jump in and help you out. Will existing employees in police and fire departments become city employees when the changeover takes place, or will the city have to hire new personnel?
And so for us, the answer is no, they will not become city employees. As you heard Bill Volkman say just a second ago, should the city of East Cobb, because that's the only one that affects public safety, but I think this is the same across the board for all 4 cities. There has been no discussion on a reduction in force policy or implementing that. We have plenty of vacancies throughout the county, so for fire department, police department, any of the departments that would be affected by these, we will reassign those in current locations where we have openings. So no, they will not become employees of the city of East Cobb. They will have to hire their own employees for fire and police and other public safety.
Another question, if Cobb County, if an unincorporated area becomes a city and expects the county to continue to provide fire and police protection, will the new city have to negotiate for those services with the county? And if so, what would the price be set at?
That's one thing where we would obviously talk with Bill Volkman, the chairwoman and her staff, our county manager, and we get a lot of the legal advice from our county attorney's office. So that's yet to be determined. And so once those things happen, if they do become incorporated into cities, we would have, robust discussions on what that looks like so that the services would be provided until they decide to take over them.
All right, I've got another public safety question that I'm going to actually answer as well because it comes from our lawyers, and we want to make sure we don't get the lawyers upset. The question is, the Pro Cityhood group claims they'll be able to obtain the East Cobb Government Center from the county, insinuating for free as taxpayers have already paid for it. They make the same claim for fire engines as well as hook and ladder trucks in the stations. Is this true? And the response? The only fees that are set by state law are for park property, $100 per acre, and for fire stations that only serve the territory wholly within the city jurisdiction. That's $5,000 apiece for the fire station. Any other county property located within the new city limits will be negotiated between the 2 local governments. So there's your legally approved answer to that question as well. Next question for you, Chief, is about the fire department in East Cobb and what that could potentially mean for response times to my particular address in the city.
Okay, so there's a multitude of ways for me to answer that question. So what I'll say initially is the proposed city of East Cobb does, for the most part, take what all the territory of Station 15 and Station 21. There's a very small portion of Station 15's territory in the northern section of their territory that is not included. However, the overall territory or the proposed city is 13% larger than the current response area for Station 15 and 21. Most of that is on the western edge of the proposed city. So those residents that live on that very far western edge that are currently being served by our Station 20, our Station 14, or our Station 3, if they get moved into the city, they absolutely will see an increase in their response time because it will be the city's responsibility at that point to respond to those addresses. It will not be unincorporated Cobb County responding to those addresses. So that is one way to answer it. Then you have to look at it as well. If you have 2 fire stations and say engine 15 is out on a call, at that point, Station 21 would have to respond to the northern part of the city. So that would increase that response time as well when, the way it stands now, in the northern part of Station 15's territory, we have those stations that are in that area that could respond into that area. I hope that makes sense. But the short answer is, for some of the people, they will not see an increased response time. But there are quite a few people who will definitely see an increased response time to their residents.
And there's been some questions that have come in that have said statements have been made that Cobb County would be able to back up or provide service to those parts of the county if it's needed during an incident.
Well, we have mutual aid agreements with Marietta, Smyrna, and Austell, and we have them with jurisdictions outside of Cobb County as well. But a mutual aid agreement is different than what we have with Marietta. Marietta, we have an automatic aid agreement, meaning we send the closest unit. And that happened years and years ago when we had a previous fire chief and Marietta had a previous fire chief, and it benefited both Marietta and Cobb because of annexations and pockets of unincorporated Cobb within the city and vice versa. For this instance, a mutual aid agreement, it wouldn't call for us just to respond if they had a unit out of service. And I think this is a good time to really segue that into our 911 director, because she can answer it in more detail than I can. But really, a mutual aid agreement is for those opportunities where a jurisdiction really has just been taxed to their limit and they cannot provide the services that they need to provide to their area. So then at that point, they ask for a mutual aid from a surrounding jurisdiction, and we'll let our 911 director get into that more detail.
Melissa Alterio.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, everyone. It actually poses a bunch more questions for us because somebody has to dispatch those fire units to the call. So the assumption from the feasibility study is that the City of East Cobb would launch their own 911 center. That is our assumption, and we do have a lot of questions about that, simply because of misrouted 911 calls. So just some education. 80% of 911 calls are from wireless 911 calls. That's due to an FCC study. 12% of that 80% are misrouted, which means that it's not out of any technology error. It's just that cell phones are routed to the closest 911 center where the cell tower is. So when you have 911 center boundaries close together, which means in close proximity to several jurisdictions together, you're more likely to get more misrouted 911 calls. So that's a concern for us, because that, according to the FCC study back in 2018, 2019, that can take, for a call transfer from one 911 center to another, it's on average of about 40 seconds. So that is a concern for us. With the City of Marietta, I mean, what would be optimal, the City of Marietta, how we do that now with mutual aid or automatic aid, we answer 911 calls and we dispatch for the City of Marietta Fire. It all happens in one place. So when we're getting that call for a structure fire, which is going to take a fairly large response, we don't have to call anybody to request that mutual aid or automatic aid. It's done automatically in the same dispatch center, if that makes sense. That kind of segue into that. So the question is really, is the City of East Cobb intending on answering all 911 calls in the City of East Cobb, and then also dispatching for police, fire, and EMS? And then when they call us for mutual aid, or if there's a mutual aid agreement with Cobb Fire, then that requires a call to us, which again takes a little bit of time. There is also a question of the radio system, and that was not mentioned in the feasibility study about what radio system that will be utilized. So there is a interoperability questions that come into play there as well. So, we are all about education and advising of the services that we do provide, but it also we have a lot of questions with it as well.
So in follow-up to that, you said there's an assumption they would have their own 911 center. If they didn't, how would it work for our 911 center to be utilized and for the city to still have its own public safety services? We take care of the City of Marietta right now, and that's really how we would mirror those services. We answer all 911 calls in the City of Marietta, as well as unincorporated Cobb, and we have actually 2 dispatchers designated specifically for Marietta Police Department, dispatchers in the same fire dispatch pod for Marietta Fire Department, also dispatching for Cobb Fire, and as well as Ackworth, City Kennesaw Ackworth Fire Department as well. So it would be, we would receive the 911 call and be able to dispatch it at the same time, because that's how
911 works. We have 911 call taker who's receiving the information, entering in the information into the computer system. At the same time, depending on the type of call, especially if it's a priority, that call gets entered while the call taker is still speaking to a caller, and then the dispatcher is dispatching the call at the very same time. We're able to provide you with specific instructions. We have a very robust training program and top-notch protocols that we do follow. So we're able to provide you pre-arrival instructions at the same time that we do have fire or medical or police response on the way. We call that the 0-minute response. So that's some pretty top high standard service that we provide, and it's a seamless time response inside the 911 center for the city of Marietta versus having to transfer the call out.
Okay. Thank you.
And Acting Police Chief Hamilton, I brought you up here too because I have a lot of questions of a general nature about police service in East Cobb, and then also police service in the other cities. If they become cities, how you will provide service to those folks.
Well, we're a little different animal, obviously, than the fire department. As far as, are we still talking about the response times?
Yeah, and just in general, just the
Okay.
level of service.
Well, when it comes down to it, if, the way it's set up now as far as unincorporated Cobb, obviously we're going to have more officers out on the streets at a particular time. So once the cities incorporate, obviously that's going to condense the area of patrols. So they're going to have a smaller beats, unlike what we currently have now, which would limit also the number of officers they're going to possibly have at the department. So normally, of course, as far as response times is concerned, they're going to be a lot longer because as it is now, police is going to respond on priority calls. So if we have officers that are on priority calls at any given time, the response times are going to be a lot longer, especially on non-priority calls. So the smaller the area, you're going to have less police officers for the city than you do currently with Cobb, with Cobb Police. And so, of course, now as far as the service is concerned, just like any city that currently now, if anyone needs help, we're going to come. It doesn't matter. I mean, if we got officers in the city that needs help, they call for help, we're going to come help. Just like we do with City of Marietta, we do with City of Austell, Powder Springs. At the end of the day, we're all a family and we're going to protect each other. But you got to realize, though, once you do incorporate, your area is going to get smaller, your number of officers are going to get smaller, and inevitably, your response times are going to get a lot longer.
And for the 3 cities that are not proposing new police departments, business as usual?
Business as usual. Nothing's going to change in the other cities.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. Chairwoman, I got a bunch locked and loaded for you.
Okay.
Will the county increase property taxes to make up for the lost revenue?
That remains to be seen. I mean, right now, if they don't move forward, we just continue operating as we are. Should they move forward, I mean, we're going to have to provide services that will need to be covered, and there could be some financial impact to that, which is why we made it very clear in the analysis that our finance department provided.
Next question is, a lot of the concerns have to do with too many people being represented by too few people. If that's the reason, why not increase the number of Cobb County commissioners?
Yeah, this question comes up a lot, and I think a lot of times it's not a question of having more representation, it's about having more service or more responsive service. When people call commissioners about a pothole, it's not the commissioners coming out there and filling that pothole. We're calling the department. And so we've been having a lot of discussions over the past 8 months, is it now, to see if we are right-sizing our departments to provide the level of responsiveness that we know that our citizens desire and deserve. I would encourage anyone to look at county governments that have more persons that are on that county government structure, and talk to them to see if they feel that provides more responsive service. But everything that I've seen from the citizens that call us would lead me to believe we need to be making sure that our departments have the number of resources to be responsive to the citizen request. As commissioners, we're here to address policy, and I cannot perceive that each commissioner that we have here on the board is not being responsive to the policy interests of their citizens. All of them take a lot of pride to get involved in their communities and hear the interests of their citizens. But where I know we need help as a county is making sure that we have the appropriate number of staff to provide to the service level that our constituents are asking for.
Next question, somewhat along those lines. Do you find it troubling that a quarter of the citizens want to form their own cities for greater community control?
I don't believe that that is an accurate assertion. It's not a quarter of our citizens, it's not 200,000 citizens that said they wanted to start a city. A city can start with 1 or 2 persons that move this forward. They are asking for a quarter of their citizens to support or to be a part of their city. And please, let's make it very clear, not even a quarter of the citizens that would be included in the city are responsible for making sure that that city actually is formed. These cityhood measures are going to be on the May ballot that has a fraction of the voting population that's going to participate in an election. So you're talking about a very small percentage determining the outcome of a quarter of our residents. But it is not a quarter of our residents that said we want this to happen.
I have some more financial questions for you, Mr. Volkman. Do state insurance fees get paid to Cobb County for unincorporated residents?
So yeah, we do have insurance premium tax that is collected within our general fund. It's based on population, and the county does receive that, and that is one of the primary sources of revenue for all 4 cities that are proposing to be incorporated.
What impact would the cityhood efforts have on the county's ability to meet its financial obligation for the Truist Park?
So the Truist Park debt service and operating expenses are not impacted by any of the proposed revenue sources, with the exception of the hotel motel tax, which is only in Mableton and Vinings, and that is a small fraction of the overall debt service and operating expenses. So that would just be I won't say a minor adjustment, because it would have an impact, but I do not foresee that being a challenge for the county as we move forward.
In the feasibility study, it appears franchise fees will provide revenue to the city of Lost Mountain, and I think some of the other cities as well, if I remember, and not reduce Cobb County revenue. Will these fees be passed on to residents of the city?
So that's kind of a unique question, because the county does collect franchise fees for cable. So that is one of the franchise fees that all the cities are proposing. However, they're proposing franchise fees for electric, natural gas, and telephone, which the county does not currently collect. So if those fees were to move forward, yes, those would be passed on to the citizens.
According to the feasibility study, the alcohol beverage taxes do not reduce Cobb County revenue. Is this a new tax the city of Lost Mountain will be adding in their city limits?
No, this is an existing tax. The county does collect it. However, we have agreements with the Cobb Marietta Exhibit Hall Authority to receive 50% of our allocation, and the Board of Education. So it would not be an impact to us directly. It would possibly impact the Galleria Authority and the Board of Education.
And you may have touched on this already. There were several questions that I got kind of along the lines where some of the cities said they will operate at a surplus because they're able to get money the county cannot get. Can you elaborate on that at all?
So I think it's proposing unique revenue sources that the county does not currently collect. We talked about franchise fees being a big piece of that. Most of the other revenue sources that they're proposing the county does collect. They're proposing to have less expenses, I mean, at the end of the day. And a lot of that is come down to the responses that you've heard from parks, from public safety. It's going to determine how they structure their departments and their services that are going to drive those expenditures.
Chairwoman, somebody's asking why the county did not do a more in-depth financial impact study.
I'll have to defer to our finance department, the ones that provided the financial assessment.
Okay, so one of the things that we looked at is these came very quick. That was one of your first questions of how did they come forward. I know they've been discussed for a period of time and did not receive a whole lot of traction. The feasibility studies have come out, and when we saw them discussed at the Capitol, we were very inquisitive because there was a lot of questions based on the feasibility studies. We did reach out to conduct our own impact study based on the short time frame that we have between now and May 24th. We were told that could not be completed in time.
Chairwoman, I don't know if you have the answer to this or anybody of our staff does, but what about stormwater in the new cities?
I don't perceive that was one of the services that would be covered, but it also begs the questions of how roads would be impacted by cities. You know, traditionally, if you have a city that borders both sides of a roadway, that road becomes a part of the city, and they have responsibility for maintaining the road. And from what I understand, they expect for the county to be able to maintain that asset. However, I did perceive that there's some consideration for franchise fees and other fees that are impacted as part of the right-of-way, and that is covered by Department of Transportation. Also, there's stormwater impacts that are a result of the roadway. So it's very interesting to want to capture all the funding associated with that right-of-way, but not have responsibility for the roads that allow us or provide us a conduit for funding for some of those infrastructure elements that are in our right-of-way, like stormwater and like utility poles and other aspects that generate part of that franchise fee. So a lot of this remains to be determined. As you stated, the cities wouldn't be in place until January, and there would be some time to negotiate that.
Chairwoman, this is a question I don't know if there's really an answer for, but somebody is somewhat upset with the fact that if you're just outside or not in one of these cityhood limits, you don't have a say in it. You don't have a voice in it. They're upset about that because they say that this will impact the entire county. What would you say to that comment?
You always have a voice. So, you know, it is our legislators that have helped to push this through. So even if you aren't in a city, those legislators still represent you. And I think that citizens should feel as if they can speak to their legislators. If you're in a city or not, they are still serving you. Now, will you have a voice at the poll? That's something different. You cannot vote in a city if you're not part of that city, but you always have a voice. No one takes that away from you. You know, so I would just encourage people, if this is something you have concerns about, let them know. Also, use your voice, many already have, to reach out to your commissioners. I mean, that's what's sparking a lot of this conversation. People are reaching out to us, and we're having this meeting here tonight, and we've put some other measures in place. So I don't want anybody to ever feel as if they don't have a voice in things that are going on around them.
I think I already asked this question, but I've got several of the same thing. Is this going to mean our taxes are going up?
It depends. You know, that's the lawyer's favorite answer. I am not aware, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not aware of any new city that has formed that has not ever raised taxes. If somebody can show me a city that has formed and not raised taxes, then I can say the answer is no, your taxes won't be raised. Now, immediately, will they be raised if this moves forward in the May ballot? Are you going to see a tax impact the next day? The answer is no. So in the short run, no would be a qualified answer. But in the long run, again, I have yet to be pointed to a new city that has formed where they have not had some increased tax.
Chief Johnson, since you've been sitting there patiently, what percentage of the county fire fund goes to East Cobb, and how will having it removed from your fire fund affect your department?
As far as the percentage, you know, Bill Volkman could answer that better than I could, but the number was around $14.1 million. And so our current budget is $112 million. So if the City of East Cobb were to happen, what we would have to do is one of two things. We would have to either go to the board and ask them to adjust the fire fund millage rate so that we could maintain those services, but then we would also need to take a look at our services and say, where are there areas, if we could or if we needed to, do we need to make some adjustments? And so those are a couple of ways. And so if it were to happen, then we'll dive in deep with our command staff and look, you know, pretty microscopically at our spending, and is there areas where we can cut back. The last thing we want to do is remove services to the citizens of unincorporated Cobb, because they've come to expect a certain level of service from us. And we want to continue to provide that level of service. And so we would just have to take a deep look at it.
And I want to double back to something that I don't know if we answered clearly, because somebody else hit me with an email. For the cities, if they become cities that don't propose police and fire, I assume it's just, like I asked the chief, business as usual.
100% business as usual. They will receive the same benefit that they currently receive. They will get the services of all of our specialty teams throughout the entire county, so they will not see a change at all.
Another question for you, and Chief Hamilton can chime in on this if he wants. This is happening very quickly. Has anybody with the police or fire department been in contact with anybody at the city of East Cobb about helping them plan their fire and or police departments moving ahead?
I will answer on behalf of fire. We have not had any conversations with anybody on the committee for the cityhood of East Cobb. We have had conversations with people who have reached out to us to get information or ask questions for people who are opposed to the city. I will tell you that we have plans, hopefully in the near future. We are planning to meet with a committee member for the cityhood, hopefully as early next week.
And I'll just echo what Chief Johnson said. We have not been contacted by any proponents of the cityhood. Most of the people that have approached us have been people that oppose the cityhood. So as Chief Johnson said, we do have meetings coming up with some people that are proponents for it. So we'll just see what happens from there.
And I would like to add also that our 911 director is shaking her head. She has not talked to anyone from the committee either.
Okay. All right, I'm getting a couple of last minute emails, and I just want to ask anybody in the audience if we've left anything out you still want discussed, please get it up here as quick as possible, because I'm trying to get this done in an hour, because I have some place to go eat dinner. Michael Brantley, quick question for Parks. Hyde Farm is a beautiful large tract of undeveloped land. What happens if East Cobb Cityhood is improved? Can they just turn it over to developers?
So the question for that, Ross, is no. A lot of our properties, especially a lot of the properties that were purchased with the 2006 or 2008 Parks bond, not necessarily Hyde Farm, but a lot of those properties have deed restrictions. And Hyde Farm is kind of one of those unique properties that we have in the county. At some point we would have loved, and hopefully we still have that chance to turn it into a working farm. So Hyde Farm is one of those that's probably going to be uniquely protected for hopefully generations to come.
Okay, thank you. And this lovely lady was telling me that Chairwoman, she says there are cities who have not raised taxes in recent years.
They haven't, for 10 years.
For 10 years,
They
so.
haven't raised taxes on the new cities.
Again, just help to educate us on what those are, because from my conversations, we have not been able to identify them.
I'm telling you, the cities that have already been formed have not raised taxes in 10 years.
Okay.
And the other thing,
Oh, you're
too-
talking about our existing cities?
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. The ones that are already in existence, a lot of them may not have, and I can't make that assertion, but they do have an additional millage on top of the county's millage. They don't have a zero millage.
I'm talking about, you
So-
said they've raised taxes.
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. For one, I think it's a little appropriate for us to be going back and forth when other members of the audience have not had that opportunity. But let me just clarify. I'm not aware of any newly formed cities that have been around for the past 0 to 5 years that have not increased their millage after they've become a city. Now, some of our older cities that have been around, they may not have increased their taxes, but they do have a city tax.
We got a couple of last minute additions here. Said we haven't heard a whole lot about Mableton and what's going on down there. And I think one of the reasons is because that's a little bit in limbo right now. And so what would you say to the people in Mableton about the situation that they are facing?
As of today, it is not on the May ballot. So that would be considered potentially later this year, depending how things go in the legislature. So it's just, right now, we don't perceive that'll be on the May ballot.
Okay. Do you have any last concluding comments you'd like to make before we wrap this up?
Yes. I appreciate everyone who's here tonight, everyone who's participating in person, and everyone who's here virtually. We are simply here to answer questions on behalf of the county because we believe we are here to serve everyone. And in serving everyone, that means being responsive. And in being responsive, that means answering the questions that they have. So we could not sit idly by. It is not our desire to take a position on this, to oppose cityhood or to support it. I've shared many times my history of coming into county government was in being a community advocate. And I recognize the interest in wanting to create something where you have more autonomy in what happens in the community around you. And that's not something I ever want to take away from anyone. But what I do think is important is for people to know, be aware, or understand that this will impact the county, and for them to be aware of what that impact may be, whether it's operational or whether it's financial. I also think it's important for people to know the reasons why cities are forming. Certainly, again, I believe in going out and taking ownership of things that impact you and that are around you. But I do take issue with misinformation. I do take issue with people making assertions about me or this board that are not true to form a city. And I say if people are not going to be honest in how a city starts, what would keep them from not being honest in how to maintain that city? So, you know, that's something that concerns me, and I feel very passionate about addressing, especially with some of the assertions that I'm hearing about things that I may have said around land use and zoning. We are very fortunate that we live in a county that continues to grow and attract people who are here. It's a very diverse county demographically, but we are a diverse county geographically. We have areas of our county that are close to being urban. We have areas of our county that are rural and everything in between. And I'm grateful for that character. And we spend a lot of sleepless nights before zoning trying to address how we maintain that character and still address the appeal of the county and how we continue to grow. But we've never wanted to do that without our citizens. The way we grow is how our citizens grow with us. And I want our citizens to know that we will continue to do that. This board will continue to do that. The boards that come after us will continue to do that. Our staff will continue to do that because we want to provide the best service that we can for Cobb County. And the best service that we can provide in response to the questions about cityhood is to continue to be out in front of the public, to answer questions that they may have. This is the first out of what will probably be a series of public meetings. If you have any desires for different things that we can address that weren't addressed tonight, please let us know. We've had some interest in having the proponents and opponents of cities be in our public meetings, and that's something that we can consider because, again, we want to be responsive. But again, thank you all of you for being here today, and look forward to seeing you on other nights for the next few weeks as we address this important topic.
And we invite everybody to go to our website, cobbcounty.org/cityhood. We've got a lot of updating to do after tonight, I think, to get some more information out there as well. We'll put a replay of this forum up on that page as well. Keep the cityhood questions at cobbcounty.org handy. If you have any questions, keep them coming. We will have more forums just like this. Public service announcement for Cobb TV. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we have a senior mental health forum that we will stream on these very same channels. Please tune in for that. And I got this in under an hour. Somebody's buying me dinner. Thank you.
All right.